Now on the order of third reading is Senate Bill 818. Mr. Secretary, please read the bill.
Senate Bill 818, an act concerning education, third reading of the bill.
Senator Villavallum to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 818 establishes the requirements for public and charter schools that decide to teach comprehensive personal health and safety education in grades K through 5 and comprehensive sexual health education in grades 6 through 12, so that it is age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate, inclusive, and complete. In recent years, the news has been filled with reporting on child sex abuse scandals, sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual assault on college campuses, and bullying of LGBTQ students and people of color. Our youth see this coverage. They need medically and factually accurate information, as well as a safe environment to develop the skills they need to navigate our modern world. And with that, I would ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Rezin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Question to the sponsor, please.
The sponsor indicates he will yield.
Sure, thank you. Senator, can you go through, please, the breakdown of what's to be taught for second grade, fifth grade, and eighth grade, please?
Senator Villavallum.
Not this. Maybe this one, yes.
No, these are stories.
Oh, those are stories. Oh, here you go. I think it's second grade. So anatomy, physiology.
Is there another example?
I don't believe so. Oh, another grade.
Thank you for the question, Senator. In younger grades like kindergarten through second, the focus is on personal safety, what it means to be a good friend, and being able to talk to parents and trusted adults when someone wants you to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. In grades 3 to 5, instruction continues to cover healthy relationships and safety, but also delves into what children at those ages are experiencing, like the physical, social, and emotional changes related to puberty. In the U.S., puberty can begin as early as age 8 for girls and age 10 for boys. Then in 6th through 12th grade, sexual health education builds on previous lessons to continue discussions on personal safety, healthy relationships, identity, and begins to incorporate information related to sexual health.
Senator Rezin.
Thank you, Senator. According to our analysis, and if you can let me know if this is right or wrong, according to our analysis by the National Sex Education Standards, that second graders should be able to define consent, define gender identity, stereotypes, define reproduction, identify different types of families, including cohabitating and same gender. Is that correct for second grade?
Senator Villavallum.
I believe that is what we would describe as understanding what would be a healthy relationship.
Senator Rezin.
Thank you, Senator. So in fifth grade, our analysis states, and let me know if this is correct, fifth graders should be able to describe the potential role of hormone blockers on young people who identify, as transgender, distinguish between a whole different, many different definitions here. But in general, is that what's to be taught in fifth grade?
Senator Villavallum.
Before, this is where it delves into what children at those ages are experiencing, like the physical, social, and emotional changes related to puberty.
Senator Rezin.
Thank you, Senator. According to the National Standard Education Standards. So in eighth grade, eighth graders should be able to define sexual identity and explain a range of identities related to sexual orientation and everything else. So in general, is that what the National Sex Education Standards propose?
Senator Villavallum.
Anatomy and physiology. I would characterize that, Senator, as that's part of understanding the anatomy and physiology.
Senator Rezin.
Senator, and lastly, does your bill, according to the National Sex Education Standards, published by the Future of Sex Education, state that all pregnant young people should have the decision-making power in their reproductive health decisions despite being a minor?
Senator Villavon.
That's not state law, right? Understanding your body and understanding your rights and what you can do isn't necessarily what you're allowed to do under state law. So probably wouldn't have any bad questions, but it's about understanding what the possibilities are of making sure you can make a proper, healthy decision for your body and yourself.
Senator, I would just say that it's about understanding the health and safety decisions that are possible for that youth.
Senator Resin.
Thank you, Senator. We talked a lot about the National Sex Education Standards. Is that according to ISB or the Federal Education Department of Education?
Senator Villavon.
Parents, teachers, researchers, individuals that do this not necessarily for a living, but study these types of things and try and make best guidance.
So it's our understanding that those standards are created by a board of folks that have expertise as it relates to personal health and safety. I will also say that it is in the legislation that by August 1, 2022, the Illinois State Board of Education shall adopt rigorous education standards that align with the national standards for comprehensive personal health and safety education and sexual health education.
Senator Resin.
So is it fair to say that some of the advocacy groups that put together the national sex education standards would consist of the Chicago Abortion Fund, let's see, who else? Planned Parenthood, let's see, McHenry County Citizens for Choice, She Votes Illinois. Are these the advocacy groups that came together to put the national standards that we're talking about today in this legislation?
Senator Villavon.
There was a whole host of stakeholders that worked for nearly 2 years, having meetings across the state to gather input from youth, from parents, from teachers, from community members as to how to move forward to ensure our youth are being safe and healthy. And as far as that list is concerned, I would add, obviously, Planned Parenthood, Equality Illinois, but there is also Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago. There's the Illinois Public Health Association, the Illinois School Counselor Association, the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Youth, the Holt Center for Healthy Living, the National Association of Social Workers, and many more.
Senator Resin.
Thank you. I appreciate, thank you, Senator, for answering my questions. I mean, we look at this language, and I know that when we talked about it, we keep referencing the national sex standards, sex education standards, but when you look at the groups that have put these standards together, they're probably not groups that are reflective of many people, not only on our side, but also some on your side. So, we have concerns about what is in this bill. We feel that the schools should have more of an option to decide what they're going to teach. I think that parents and families should have the ability also to decide what is told to their child and what is not in school, and because of that, I ask for a no vote. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. President. Inquiry of the sponsor, please.
Sponsor indicates he'll yield.
Thank you. Senator, I believe that your amendment took out the mandatory language where this has to be taught. It's mandatory that this is taught. However, in my reading of it, it looks like there's only the option of either teaching this or nothing. Is that accurate?
Senator Villavon.
Number one, yes. Amendment number 4, remove the requirement. Number 2, the options are you either teach what's in the statute or nothing.
Senator Bryant?
So either they teach this, the language of this bill, or they can teach nothing at all. And also my reading in this is that there's no emphasis any longer put on teaching abstinence.
Senator Villavon?
Again, it's either teach what's currently in statute or what's going to be in statute or nothing. And 2, abstinence is part of what's in this curriculum.
Senator Bryant?
Sorry, I'm still trying to get used to the Senate, not the House. But even though abstinence has one small little line in the curriculum, it's no longer emphasized as having been mandated as part of this, right? So you no longer have to teach a portion of this as abstinence. It's choice.
Senator Villavon?
The provision you're speaking to, Senator, is a provision like every other provision that is included in this bill.
Senator Bryant?
Senator, I'm very sorry. I can hardly hear you over here. So if there's any way, I heard what you said now, but it's very difficult to hear you. So again, if the way this is written, there is the opportunity to teach abstinence, but it is not required. So there may or may not be any portion of abstinence taught in this.
Senator Villavon?
Yes.
Senator Bryant?
Also, another component of this allows for groups to come in and be like guests. So it looks to me as though groups like Planned Parenthood, Equity Illinois could be guest lecturers under these provisions. But is it also possible for, say, a crisis pregnancy to come in and teach abstinence?
Senator Villavon?
The school districts will decide. The experts or the organizations you just mentioned, there's other organizations that can also be brought in. That's a local control decision.
Senator Bryant?
The national sex standards, basically.
So no one, in the provisions of this bill, my understanding is that no one can teach anything that is in conflict. I believe the wording is, may not conflict with the provisions of Senate Bill 818. So no one could be brought in that would conflict with any provision of this.
Senator Villavon?
The goal is to ensure that our youth have age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate information.
Senator Bryant?
Age appropriate is what you're saying, is that correct?
Senator Villavon?
Yes.
Senator Bryant?
So I was made aware of there's no mandated curriculum for this this provision. However, one of the organizations that put this program together, that put this direction together, advocates for certain curriculum. One of those curriculum I passed out to a few members yesterday. It's for ages 10 and up. It's called It's Perfectly Normal. And in that book, I cautioned the people that I gave it to, anyone who knows me knows I'm not prude, right? But looking at the pictures in this, I guess they get by with some of the pictures because they're technically sketches or cartoonish. They're not actual photographs. But I want people to understand that the organization, one of the organizations that's advocating for this, a portion of their curriculum has photographs that 10-year-olds would be looking at with complete frontal nudity, including pubic hair, both male and female. One picture that has a male erection. There is a picture of an individual looking at themselves and touching themselves in the mirror. And I could go on, but I think it's beneath this chamber. But I do think that before someone votes yes for this bill, they need to take a look at what the advocacy groups are suggesting as possible curriculum for this program. And so, I told the people that I gave this to, please don't leave this setting out where a child might get their hands on it. But again, I thank you for taking my questions, Senator. Clearly, I have lots more questions, but I think some other folks might get to them. If anybody wants a copy of this book, I have a few in my office that I'd be happy to hand out to you. I strongly urge a no vote on this bill. I think that the organizations that have put this together do not represent any of our children in an age-appropriate way, and would ask again for a no vote on the bill. Thank you.
Further discussion. The board is lighting up, so we will try to go in order here. Senator Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the bill?
The bill.
I just want to dispel a few things here, because we talk about things like unfunded mandates when we talk about age-appropriate and medically factual sex education. But let's talk about some of the mandates. I believe this session we passed a mandate on teaching Asian American history. And for the people who are so opposed to mandates, I believe they voted for that. This is another mandate that is giving some good factual information to our youth. Why is this important? Not everybody grows up in a family where these matters are discussed at home, and they're not issues in the family that make these issues not only taboo, but where there are members of the family that are actually violating children. Children need to be aware of what's going on so they can help protect themselves, to understand what the world is. So it just sort of gets to me every time somebody brings up the unfunded mandate thing. And then when they bring up that should young children be, being taught about an unintended pregnancy, or is that a problem? You know what's a problem? The problem is that maybe we were not teaching appropriate sex education so that these minors could have not gotten into the situation where they had an unintended pregnancy. I sort of believe maybe we should do the steps that teach prevention before we go in there and decide we need to do something after the fact. I just don't understand it. I think what we are doing when we are teaching, again, age-appropriate, medically accurate sex education to our children, we are arming them with knowledge. And I don't know when that has ever been a bad thing. I would urge a yes vote.
Further discussion. Senator Bailey. The bill.
You know, I sit here and I listen to this and I participate in what I expect to be a prestigious body. And here we are dealing with absolute nonsense of putting perversion into our schools. Yeah, that's what it is. It's perversion. Our schools, teachers who are learning to teach our kids proper education have absolutely no reason in teaching this kind of stuff. This is certain. If we want to do something, let's make it easier for the family unit to stay together. Let's make it easier for people to live and thrive here in Illinois. But unfortunately, we can't even do that. We come here, how long has it been since we've had the true things that this body, that this house is supposed to be in charge of? We can't even do that properly. But yet we think we can come here and we can share this junk and this nonsense in public school. It is absolutely wrong, friends. Let's focus on what our due diligence is. Let's make it easier for families to work, to thrive, to raise children. And then this will be dealt with properly, not here with a rule of law. Thank you.
Senator Doris Turner.
I have a question of the sponsor.
Sponsor indicates he'll yield.
Has the curriculum for this been defined and approved? Has the curriculum been defined and approved?
Senator Villavellum.
There's absolutely definitions. Yeah, there's definitions and approved by the board of people right there.
By the way.
Yes, by everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. I was having trouble hearing you. Yes, the National Sex Education Standards was developed by a group of experts, public health experts, and it has been defined.
Senator Turner.
Is the publication that Senator Bryant referenced and was very graphic in her explanation part of the approved curriculum?
Senator Villavellum.
No.
Senator Turner.
Thank you. I always find it very interesting when people talk about family and family structure. I think that we should all be reminded that families come in very different sizes and boxes, and no one has the right to define what a family is and what a family should consist of. Thank you.
Senator Villanueva.
Does the sponsor yield?
Sponsor in case he'll yield.
Senator, what's the main goal of this bill?
Senator Villavellum.
Thank you, Senator. The main goal is to ensure that our youth have the opportunity to be safe and healthy by obtaining and having access to age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate information, and making sure that no one feels excluded in their classroom, no one feels excluded in their community.
Senator Villanueva.
And Senator, was this bill a bill that was worked on by various advocates, not just Planned Parenthood and Equality Illinois, but the ACLU, the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, and various other stakeholders to try to find commonalities? Because we actually had two different bills. Is that correct?
Senator Villavellum.
Yes, indeed. As I mentioned before, ACLU, AIDS Foundation, Planned Parenthood, Equality Illinois have worked for close to 2 years going around the state, community by community, talking to the local youth, the local parents, teachers, to understand what they're going through, understand what they would like to see in terms of personal health and safety education and sexual health education. It's been a long effort, it's been inclusive, and we did work together to bridge our two pieces of legislation and a number of other stakeholders that weighed in as well.
Senator Villanueva.
To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill.
In one of my lives, in my previous lives before I joined the General Assembly, I was a sexual health educator. I live this life. I'm one of those people that came into the schools to educate young people about their sexual health, because unfortunately, what we had seen in that situation was the rise of not only misinformation, but a lack of knowledge for our students. So here's what I'm not going to allow to happen when people decide that they want to call this bill perversion. Because let's be completely honest, when you use your talking points, your Trumpian talking points, to talk about what this bill really is about, when what we're trying to do is educate children about their bodies, but also educate them about the predators that actually exist in this world. What I'm not going to allow anybody to do is to try to use ridiculous talking points to try to pretend to get their point across for a soundbite, because that's what I'm not going to allow anyone to do. This bill is a bill that was worked on with a lot of dedication and concern to the reality that families come in different shapes and forms, and that students, even at a very tender age, with the understanding of taking that tender age into consideration, should be educated on this, should know about these things. And no, at no point is it saying that a high schooler is going to get the same education as a second grader, because they don't even get the same type of mathematical education. So you can keep your perversion, and we'll push for actual education of our students.
Because her name was used in debate, I'm going to return to Senator Bryant for a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, when the question was asked by a previous speaker whether or not the curriculum that I described was a part, with the book that I described is a part of the curriculum, and you answered no. So is there a set curriculum right now? Is there a curriculum that the specific that everyone in here could look at to say this is the curriculum?
Senator Villavellum.
Well, first, your book is not a curriculum, it's a book. Second, schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials. So that is part of the process that we put in this legislation.
Senator Bryant.
So I would say it's accurate that there is no set curriculum yet, but what the bill requires is that it follow the national sex education standards. The organizations that are a part of that include an organization that advocates for the book that I mentioned as possible curriculum, and that's for ages 10 and up. That is curriculum that is advised. So as the schools put them together, clearly they're going to be in violation of the law if they don't use the standards that are put together by the National Sex Education Standards, right? So those organizations are the ones that are going to be advocating for that, for those books, for that curriculum. That book is one of the ones that they suggest. So I just wanted to come back to that point. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Anderson.
To the bill, Mr. President.
Bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the body, first of all, I don't want to get in a stone-throwing match here. I think the intent of the sponsor, I'm not going to question his intent. I think his intent is for good, but we all know the saying about intent, right? Intentions. I don't think anybody in this room has an issue with medically accurate teachings in our school as far as sex education. Nobody has any issue with anatomy and physiology teaching in our schools. But the issue with this bill is there is enough good intent in this legislation that serves as the fig leaf to a lot of bad things. Okay? So we talked about age appropriateness. And this book that my colleague brought up in the cover, it says this book will serve as a useful tool in the sex education curriculum. Okay? This is for 4th and 5th graders. I'm going to put it this way, and I want everybody to please listen to me. And again, this is I want people to really listen and take this to heart, especially if you have kids. If you think that it is okay for a teacher in a public school to teach 4th and 5th graders what anal sex, oral sex, and dental dams are, then you should vote for this bill. If you think that maybe, just maybe, that goes outside of age appropriateness, and that maybe that should be something that if you as a parent decide to teach your kid, by all means do it. But in the public school setting, outside of anatomy and physiology and basic sex education, this is outrageous. And again, I'll say it again, if you push your green button today on this bill, you are okay with a stranger teaching your 4th or 5th grader what anal sex, oral sex, and what dental dams are. I ask for a no vote.
Further discussion, Senator Van Pelt.
Thank you. First of all, I want to commend the sponsor for bringing this bill. In my history of, before I came here, I was a preacher, and I preached on a regular basis. And when I looked at bills like this, it was really, really hard for me to get my hands around it because it was so contrary to what we teach in church. But this is a law, this is not church. And we are representatives of the people in our district. We are not their preachers. We are not their pastors. We're not the ones that's gonna make them keep the values right or their morals right. I learned by being here that many of the things that we held true in the church was actually hurting our community. And I think not having that knowledge, not letting those children have the knowledge about what this is, and something that the senator just spoke about, I had never even heard of, dental something. So I had never even heard it. I had to ask her. So I needed one of those classes myself. So it's like, I can try to catch up with y'all. So you know what? So I'm standing in support of this bill as a new Patricia, not the Patricia that came in here. Because the Patricia that came in here would have had a hard time even voting for it, more or less standing up and saying, yes, these children need to know what's happening to them. Children are being molested every day and don't even know what's going on. So the class will help, I think, bring more knowledge to the table, help the kids be more prepared, and also it's up to their parents to really promote the ideals and the values that they really want to have in that household. So I urge an aye vote, and I support this because I think it's a timely measure. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Belt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have questions to the sponsor.
He indicates he'll yield.
Senator, is this mandatory? Is this class mandatory?
Senator Villavellum.
No, it's optional.
Senator Belt.
Am I correct to assume that all sex ed classes in the state of Illinois would be optional?
Senator Villavellum.
Yes, a parent or guardian can opt their student out of instruction.
Senator Belt.
So to Senator Anderson's point, if a parent would want their child in this class, they would opt in.
Senator Villavellum.
A parent or guardian could opt their student out of instruction.
Senator Belt.
Once a parent enrolled their child in this class, then there would be the district and that parent then would discuss the curriculum and what the class entails, correct?
Senator Villavellum.
So ISB will make resource materials available to schools, and schools, again, will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials.
Senator Belt.
The parents would know that one is optional. Two, if they chose to enroll their child in that class, then they would be aware of what the course offered, correct?
Senator Villavellum. Senator Belt.
Then that's all. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Simmons.
Mr. President, this is the Senate for the state of Illinois, and I expect a certain degree of decorum and respect that we all would afford each other. I certainly intend to lead by example. I find the word perversion to be deeply offensive and would ask that it be stricken from the record.
Take that under advisement. Further discussion, Senator Paciano-Zayas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to speak to the bill, if the sponsor.
To the bill.
I, too, was an HIV/AIDS peer educator in high school and in college. I learned about what is medically appropriate, how to speak about sex education and health safety in very clear terms so that my peers could understand the decisions that they were potentially going to be making. The research bears out that when we speak about these issues in ways that are developmentally appropriate, that are culturally responsive, that are medically informed, people make different decisions. And to the point that this is optional, families can opt out, I can speak to that. I have 2 children, one in kindergarten, one in second grade. There was an incident when one of my children was in preschool that was inappropriate. And I advocated that we needed to have developmentally appropriate instruction for young children to understand when there is a situation where somebody is uncomfortable, touched inappropriately, we address it, we educate it, we use that as a teachable moment. In fact, the words that I said to the principal is, this is how Me Too starts. If we do not address in clear terms and equip children with the appropriate vocabulary and the ability to speak on their behalf, then we are only aiding and abetting people being mistreated, harmed, and in the worst situations, sexually abused and assaulted. This information is life-saving. This information is also in alignment with what the State Board of Education has been doing. When I was on the State Board of Education, there was an inclusive and affirming task force that specifically was trying to provide school districts with the framework around LGBTQ students and how we can better support and welcome them into our school communities, because they are our school communities. They are our children and young people. This was provided as guidance so that we can honor the humanity of all of our children, so that we don't participate in the marginalization, the othering. That's what this work is. That the root of all of this, the goal of sex education, is to help young people navigate sexual development and grow into sexually healthy adults. The standards provide clear, consistent, straightforward guidance on information that is life-saving. We are talking about equipping our children and young people with life-saving information. I stand firmly behind this bill. That is why I asked to be a chief co-sponsor, because this is precisely the information and all the vetting that has gone into this with all the groups that have informed it, to be very specific about what's appropriate at what age group and what are the topics that are best to introduce at the developmentally appropriate time. This is going to save lives. And I can tell you, because in many of the ways that I served as an HIV/AIDS peer educator, I know that that made a difference in people's lives. It made a difference in the choices I made. And to leave that out of the education of our children, and families can decide if they want it or not. The curriculum can be locally determined. And all we're saying is that baseline, these are the parameters. I urge an aye vote, and I thank the sponsor for introducing this bill.
Further discussion, Senator Peters.
A question for the sponsor.
He indicates he'll yield.
I want to know real quick, is this going to help an 8-year-old to know how they're being touched and treated, or is this not going to do that?
Senator Villavellum.
It is, this legislation is going to ensure that the 8-year-old has age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate information to be safe and healthy.
Senator Peters.
To the bill.
Bill.
I think it's really good if an 8-year-old understands their body and how they should be touched and treated, instead of the rhetoric that's coming from the other side. Whether it's my nephew, my sister, or whoever kid I might have, I would just like them to know how they should be touched and treated and learn how to do so. And I commend the sponsor for carrying this bill, and I hope everybody votes aye. Thank you.
And our final speaker is Senator Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Question for the sponsor.
Indicates he will yield.
Thank you. Senator, do we know how many children are having sex today in Illinois? Does anyone?
Senator Villavellum.
No, I do not, Senator.
Senator Hunter.
You know whether or not children are having sex at a younger age? in comparison to 5 and 10 years ago?
Senator Villavellum. Sorry, Senator Hunter.
Or do you know the pregnancy rate of ages 10 to 17?
Senator Villavellum.
Senator, I believe that our youth are being exposed more and more to different types of information, and that's why we want to make sure that they have the right information that they're learning.
Senator Hunter.
So if the parents are not teaching their children sex education, who's teaching the children about sex education, Senator?
Senator Villavellum.
Well, some of our colleagues use some props on the other side, so I'll use one myself and go to google.com, and unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation out there that we're seeking to address with this legislation.
Senator Hunter.
So does it really matter if the children in northern Illinois or southern Illinois or eastern or western Illinois are getting the education that they need? Is there one region that gets more education than another region?
Senator Villavellum.
Thank you, Senator. That is no. We need to make sure that every youth, no matter what community they're from, is getting age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate information.
Senator Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I honestly believe that my colleagues on this side of the aisle is very correct, that if we do not teach the accurate, most up-to-date information to children, they will wind up getting information from anywhere that is inaccurate, which is why we have a higher rate of sex, a higher rate of pregnancy, a higher rate of STDs. You know, I talk to young people all the time. I even talk to some of my adult friends, and they were telling me that their parents didn't want to talk to them about sex, period. They just did not want to. But they were having sex. They were getting pregnant at a young age. And these are people who were 50 and 60 years old, you know? So if you don't teach it in school, then you wind up making all kinds of mistakes that could be prevented if we just add sex education as an option. Because when I was in school, we had sex education. It was an option, and our parents had to sign for it. And I'm grateful that my mother and father signed my permission slip, because if not, all of my girlfriends, they wind up dropping out of high school because they wind up getting pregnant. Because there was no one there to teach them the do's and don'ts of sex. We no longer have nuclear families that we had back when I was growing up. You have maybe one parent, or you have a grandparent or a great-grandparent or other relatives who are raising their children or their grandchildren. So this is a great bill. I would ask you all to vote for it, and thank you very much for bringing this bill forth, Senator.
I'm sorry, that was not our last speaker. I did not see the light. Senator Plummer.
Question of the sponsor, Mr. President.
The sponsor indicates he will yield.
Thank you. So to the previous comments that were just made, I agree with much of them. And I think that's a concern that I have with this bill, because what we've done here is we've taken this curriculum and we've said this curriculum, it's all or nothing. You have to use this curriculum or there's no curriculum. And so what you're going to have is you're going to have folks in certain districts that may say, we don't want this curriculum. Or you're going to have parents who are going to say, we're going to opt our children out of this curriculum. And instead of having reasonable curriculum that will address some of the very legitimate concerns that have been expressed, you're going to have a significant number of children in Illinois that are getting no education. Because this bill is extreme and it's all or nothing. And that's a real problem in my mind. My question to the sponsor would be, right now, do we already have provisions in law to teach about sexual abuse at elementary level?
Senator Villavon.
The answer to the question, Senator, is that right now, number one, again, it's optional. Number two, if it is taught, it has to be comprehensive.
Senator Plummer.
So this keeps it optional, though, correct?
Senator Villavon.
Yes.
Senator Plummer.
Well, who's for the sexual abuse education and curriculum that's being taught right now in schools, who's actually teaching it, and how is it developed?
Senator Villavon.
School districts.
Senator Plummer.
So if the school districts developed it and are implementing it right now, this new optional curriculum was developed by who? Because I heard you say that it was developed by educational experts. I didn't hear any specific names, but who developed this?
Senator Villavon.
I think he's talking about. If I understand you, if I heard your correction, or your question, you asked who developed this legislation?
Senator Plummer. Senator Villavon.
I don't know if you're asking about standards, but again, I'll repeat. ISB will make resource materials available to schools. Schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials.
Senator Plummer.
To clarify my last question, who developed the National Sex Education Standards?
Senator Villavon.
So, if you're asking about standards, there's a whole host of people that are a part of the K through 12 Advisory Committee. Oh, turn to page 4 if you have the document in your hand, please.
Senator Plummer.
Let's just jump to it. So I see advocates for youth, young, powerful, taking over. Who are they?
Senator Villavon.
Advocates. Senator, let me rephrase. This page 4 of the document you're looking at includes a comprehensive list of people that are a part of the National Sexuality Education Standards Core Content and Skills K through 12 Advisory Committee. If you're referencing 2 people, I'm more than happy to read you the rest of the folks that are a part of this list, this committee, who are medical professionals, who are professors, who have PhDs, MDs, and so much more.
Senator Plummer.
There's a whole litany of lists of names of random people that have very impressive sounding credentials. That's great. My question is, could you please, as the sponsor of this bill, I'll let you pick one of the 3. Advocates for Youth, answer Sex Ed Honestly, or this one here, Sex Ed for Social Change. Could you tell me about any of them? Could you tell me where they're headquartered or anything?
Senator Villavon.
I was looking at that. Those are the overarching organizations. There's people that get these
Senator, those are the overarching organizations. I'd like to bring it back to this legislation and again reiterate that ISB will make resource materials available to schools. Schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials. Standards are there, curriculum is separate, and that's decided by the school districts.
Senator, would you like to speak to the bill?
I have one more question, and then I will. Thank you, Mr. President. So that answer kind of highlights my point that there's a whole lot of children in Illinois that because of this won't get any sex education because it's all or nothing. But all of these groups, none of them are headquartered in Illinois. Most of them are headquartered in DC, and it takes me back to all of the times on the floor of this body I hear all of the horror stories about dark money and all of these different groups that are sneaking into government and sneaking into campaigns. Well, now we have dark money organizations. You don't know who funds these groups. We've looked into it. You can't find who funds these. Could we have some decorum?
Please, some courteous.
Thank you, Mr. President. We don't know who funds these groups. We don't know anything about these groups. They're shell groups. They're made-up groups. They've got P.O. boxes in Washington, D.C., and they're receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, of dark money that goes directly to building the curriculum that you're putting into our schools. I have never seen any curriculum in any of our schools at any level that's funded by dark money where we can't trace who's defining the curriculum. And this is some of the members on the other side act like we don't have nieces or nephews or daughters or sons or brothers or cousins or anything like that. We have them too. I'd like to know who's funding the curriculum, who's funding the organizations that are bringing sex education to our schools, and the sponsor of the bill seems incapable of telling us anything about these organizations. I find that extraordinarily troubling. Could you tell us something about the organizations or who funds them or anything?
Senator Villevong.
Senator, it says national for a reason. They're national sexuality education standards, core content and skills, K through 12 advisory committee. That's the standards that we've looked at. As it pertains to this legislation, as I mentioned before, ISB will make resources materials available to schools. Schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials. If you have, after this law passes, knock on wood, if you have issues, go to your local school board. Talk to them.
Senator Palmer to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, I know unfortunately in this era of government, it's hard to change people's minds, and I know we automatically jump to one side or the other side, but sometimes it just comes down to common sense. And regardless of where you stand on these issues, right, this legislation ensures that a large number of young children in Illinois will not receive sex education to protect them from things like predators, from sexual abuse. This ensures it. You're voting to ensure that children in Illinois will not get the proper education to protect them from predators and sexual abuse. That's what this does, because it's all or nothing. We don't know why it's all or nothing. We don't think it should be all or nothing. And on top of that, for those school districts that do implement this, for your cousins and your nephews and your daughters and sons and everything else, you have no idea who these groups are. You have no idea who's funding these groups. And based on some of the back and forth, I don't think you're entirely sure of what the curriculum actually contains. Very troubling information. And for a topic that is so important, I have 3 children myself who are about to go into elementary school in a few years. And for a topic that's so important, that has such a societal impact, for us to pass something we know very little about and ensures a lot of kids won't receive the protections you say you care about, I find that to be entirely contradictory. I urge a no vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Villevong to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank my colleagues on this side of the aisle for their words of support and their support. I want to thank Senator Villanueva for working with me on this, and the coalition of groups, ACLU, AIDS Foundation, Planned Parenthood, Equality Illinois, but so many others, to list a few, including the Ann and Robert Laurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Illinois Public Health Association, the Illinois School Council Association, and so many more. I just want to go back and bring it back. This is what this bill does. Senate Bill 818 establishes the requirements for public and charter schools that decide to teach comprehensive personal health and safety education in grades K through 5 and comprehensive sexual health education in grades 6 through 12 so that it is age and developmentally appropriate, medically accurate, inclusive, and complete. Schools with this legislation are not required to teach comprehensive personal health and safety education or comprehensive sexual health education. A parent or guardian can opt their student out of instruction. By August 1, 2022, the Illinois State Board of Education shall adopt rigorous education standards that align with the national standards. Standards will be developed with input from youth, parents, sexual health and violence prevention experts, healthcare providers, and advocates and education practitioners. ISB will make resource materials available to our schools. Schools will retain local control through the selection of curriculum and instructional materials. I guess local control matters until it doesn't. Comprehensive personal health and safety education and sex health education will help develop healthy relationships, prevent abuse, sexual violence, and interpersonal violence, and empower students to be able to make healthy and safe decisions. And I just will say, look, I'm more than happy to have healthy discussion. I understand that we're all passionately advocating for our districts. Some of us want to make political speeches. At the end of the day, this is about keeping our youth safe and healthy with age and developmentally accurate and medically accurate information. And therefore, I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 818 pass? All those in favor vote aye, opposed nay. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? We'll now go to remote voting. Senator Ellman.
Yes.
Senator Ellman votes yes. Senator Harris.
Aye.
I need to see you.
Senator Harris votes aye.
Senator Harris votes yes. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Take the record on that question. There are 37 voting yea, 18 voting nay, none voting present, and Senate Bill 818, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed.